How would you feel if you woke up this morning and Cuba had launched a bunch of drones attacking our nuclear aircraft around the country? And then you found out that China had actually helped them militarily, financially, and with information about where our planes were. Well, that's essentially what happened regarding the United States and Russia with Ukraine's recent attack on Russian installations. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Minor Issues Podcast. I'm Mark Thornton at the Mises Institute. Everybody should always be prepared to defend themselves, their loved ones, their property, and even the nation in some sense. But that is not what I'm talking about today, which is not a minor issue. In reality, preparing to keep the peace and preparing for war often involves similar types of actions. Here I'm referring to the active anticipated acts of war that many major powerful nations are currently undertaking. They don't appear to even know what they are doing, or at least do not appear to understand the implications of their actions. The mainstream media certainly does not understand that they are actively engaged in misreporting matters, or that they are actively engaged in a kind of conspiracy of propaganda to keep the general public uninformed about current conditions, which is what they claim is their role and their public purpose. Some people might treat this situation as a general mental confusion disorder or lapse of rational thought processes across society that has typically preceded social blunders large and small. Think the Salem witch trials, the Dutch tulip bubble, the French Revolution, the American Civil War, World War I, alcohol prohibition, and reefer madness all come to mind. Doesn't matter what you attribute it to, ignorance or propaganda. Once the conditions are right and the sparks occur, things can quickly get out of hand, cause tremendous social losses, and end up disastrously, even catastrophically. The most glaring aspect of the trend towards preparing for war is European and especially German emergency military spending. The media tell us this story is one of economic stimulus and a variety of other incorrect metaphors like European unity or global responsibility. In reality, this is a classic move towards war. In the old days, European leaders would have sought a disengagement of hostilities, of combatants, and attempted to mediate a peaceful resolution. In fact, there would have been some attempt to even prevent or undo the initial conditions of conflict. Instead, Europe has gone all in on the warpath. Also glaring, but even more global, is the currently escalating trade war, especially the actions of President Trump. But really, this is a growing global problem in recent years. I have heard it reported in the media several times that the trade war is just another tool in the toolbox, and it simply aims to produce a level playing field. Trade wars are intended violent acts of harm on numerous consumers, workers, and business owners in both countries that breeds contempt rather than compassion from those on the other side. This is a breeding ground for war, and indeed has been the hatchery of many military wars over the last centuries. Most important, for Americans, for example, are completely ignorant of our U.S. trade war against Japan prior to World War II. Sanctions are also acts of war. Sanctions are also an act of war. However, the United States has been increasingly using an ever increasing number of sanctions on an ever growing list of adversaries. Congress and the White House are currently drafting even more sanctions. Beyond their status as an act of war, we know one, sanctions can have awful consequences on the most disadvantaged and least politically significant people in the target countries. Sanctions are notoriously ineffective at achieving their stated ends and aims. Three, sanctions strengthen animosities and support future conflict. Perhaps Americans have become immune to the issuing of sanctions. They don't see the benefits or the costs. It's just what superpowers do to nations that won't play by our rules. However, there are tipping points, there are costs, and sanctions do undermine constructive policy choices. I don't think China wants outright war. They seem to prefer a longer run strategy of occupying and digesting their conquered peoples. And if I am to believe the CIA's own propaganda, China currently faces severe internal opposition in its conquered territories and acquisitions, and has major internal economic problems that threaten the stability of the communist regime there. I also accept what intelligent people that I respect say about Donald Trump, that he is the most pro-peace president since Jimmy Carter. Obtaining peace is much more difficult and costly than starting a war, and Trump faces crazy circumstances in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, where some players want to escalate the conflicts rather than contain them. The military industrial complex. Did I mention that Pakistan and India and China are also facing off as well militarily? You can't put a number on the dangers we face. It's all hard to gauge. Most of these problems have been festering for decades or centuries, so it's easy for the general public to become numb to the risks and for propaganda to calm any panic. Nevertheless, it would be hard to argue against the claim that there are now more active tripwire sites around the world than ever before, and that they can go nuclear. Then there is the unpredictable, like what touched off World War I. This catch-all category is arguably a great source of danger, given the role that technology can now play for instigators. However, one reliable gauge of danger is the price of gold, and it is at an all-time high and shows no signs of easing. Some people respond that gold has been rising on central bank purchases, but in reality, battles over monetary control are a leading cause of war. The sanctions that we have used that have induced central banks around the world to purchase gold are hardcore evidence of that fact. The political systems involved in modern conflict employ economic systems based on mercantilism. Mercantilism is a thoroughly discredited school of economic thought. Mercantilism was reborn more than a century ago in the form of modern, professional, mainstream economics. While all the particulars are different, the continuity between old mercantilism of the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries and modern mainstream economics can be seen in one, the primacy of government control over money. Two, The central role and special purpose of the state over the individual, akin to the feudal lord of the manor. 3. Economics is a battle against your foreign competitors rather than a demonstration of the gains from trade. And history is a series of glorious wars against your enemies. 4. It is most important for the people who are playing and benefit from this war game condition that we currently face that the pawns do the work and pay the price by largely being unaware of their own lowly role in policy or the unnecessary price that they have to pay for the game to be played. That's you.